Despite billions of dollars in new investment from the Power and Light District to a brand new arena, Kansas City's downtown makeover has failed to draw business. In fact, census figures reported this week show that rather than adding new jobs over the last decade, there's been a loss of more than 16,000 private sector jobs. That decade covers the period from shortly before the downtown redevelopment boom began to just after the major redevelopment projects like the Kansas City Power and Light District and Sprint Center were completed. But why have businesses pretty much been no-shows?
Well, a couple of reasons, Nick. First of all, getting in and out of downtown is still a bit of a challenge. Parking is still a problem. There are still fears about crime, which I think are a little overblown. Mostly, though, it's because much of the office space downtown is not what they call Class A space. It's just, they're older buildings, they're hard to reconfigure, they're hard to make modern for computers and other digital endeavors. Much easier to find an old loft somewhere if you want to be close to the center city or build in the suburbs. And then, of course, mix in the ongoing battle between Kansas and Missouri to incent businesses to move in and out of downtown. Probably not a surprise that the job creation down there has been a very big challenge.
I was looking at the quote here from Bill Dietrich, who is the president and CEO of the Downtown Council. He says, "It could have been worse if the city hadn't reinvested so heavily in downtown over the last decade." Is that a fair argument, Eric?
No. No, it hasn't. I guess you could make that argument. It could always be worse. But, you know, the Power and Light District, it continues to prove to be a failed project. How did they bail out of it? I don't know. It started out with the racial things going on. People were uncomfortable about going down there, so businesses don't move down there because of the aftermath of that. Peachtree Restaurant is one example of people that were forced to move out. A lot of businesses and restaurants down there say the rent is too high. There's nothing down there to attract people other than the times when the NCAA tournaments come around and so forth. So it was it looked good on paper, but I think it's proven to be a bad concept.
Are we looking at, though, the downtown revitalization being part of, though, getting people to live and play downtown? And is it too much to ask people to be also working downtown, Stacey?
I don't think it is, and I think I would have to agree that it would be worse if we didn't have the development in the power and light that we have. I mean, if you look at cities, for example, like St. Louis and Cincinnati that absolutely have no type of downtown activity, they have no type of retail, they have no type of entertainment, those cities, essentially the sidewalk rolls up at 5 o'clock and it's non-existent on the weekend. So we also have to look at it's something else in those numbers. The time frame we're talking about is 2001 to 2011. We forget what happened about midway through that time, which was the recession of 2008. I bet if you broke those numbers down, a lot of those job losses would have occurred in the last 4 years. I just saw a piece earlier this week that shows how many office management jobs have been lost. I bet a number of those are in that type of sector. Now, there's a lot to be improved on in the downtown area. I don't think it's too much to ask for people to work and live downtown and to play downtown. That's why I moved there. You look at similar sized cities and they just don't offer the amenities downtown that Kansas City does. However, there's still a big issue, and this raises how do we get businesses down there? And I think Dave hit on the prime thing, Class A space for office and parking.
Okay, so does that now mean we have to do a new huge more investment, more subsidies downtown to be able to get those Class A office facilities downtown?
There's a lot of talk of a convention hotel, which we've discussed here before. I don't think there are any major Class A construction projects on the board, Nick. I do think that there is some discussion going on of ways to increase traffic in the Power and Light District. The housing actually is in great demand. It's hard to find apartments or condominiums to purchase downtown. But, you know, this week, Mayor James talked to the newspaper about a hockey team in the Sprint Arena, and he said we didn't want to go after this particular team, but we're making $8 million a year on Sprint Arena as it is anyway because we get a kickback from AEG. But they're spending $14 million a year to subsidize Power and Light. It's always a balance. It's always trying to sort of understand, is it actually worth it at the end of the day? And I would say in that regard, the jury is still out, because Stacey's right. If we hadn't have done this, it would have been a mess down there. But having done it, it is expensive. It does cost taxpayers, and we'll have to figure out whether that bargain was worth it. I don't think we're in a position to make that judgment.
And there may be need to look at a makeover of the Power and Light, what type of businesses are down there. I mean, I don't go to the Power and Light a lot, and I'm a big champion of it, but I don't because it's mostly chain type of entertainment, chain type of restaurants and bars. If it was something that was Kansas City centric, it would draw not only tourists, but it would draw people like me. I think it would draw people from Overland Park and Lee Summit. So maybe as we go forward and some businesses come out and we recycle new businesses in, we need to look at a thing to make this a Kansas City signature place, and maybe then the revenue would pick up in businesses as well.
I think they need a nationally known retail like Macy's or Dillard's or someplace like that to bring people down. People that go down there, that's their destination. Usually when businesses are successful, it's a lot of foot traffic. People are going here, they're going there, they're going other places.
Like the plaza.
Like the plaza, it's that. So since they don't have that concept down there, I think it, you know, and like he said, it could always be worse, but I don't think that right now they have the right plan in place for that area.